Most of us were never taught how to grieve, how to rest, or how to be present. We were told to do each of these things, but not the skills to do so. Welcome to this episode of the Biology Trauma Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Aimie. My guest on this episode is Dr. David Rabin, and we get into those very same skills. This is part 2 of my conversation with Dr. David Rabin, a translational neuroscientist and psychiatrist who has spent more than 20 years studying stress, trauma, and the nervous system. His new book, A Simple Guide to Being Alive, became the #1 book on neuroscience on Amazon. In this podcast episode, you will learn why heart rate variability may be the single best window into your resilience, what intention actually is in the nervous system, and why grieving is a skill your body needs to learn. If you missed part 1, we covered why stress was not the enemy and how a body relearns safety. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. You say that the heart rate variability is the key marker for resilience. Explain more. Let's go into that science. How would a person be able to measure how well is my machine operating?
Yeah. So basically, heart rate variability is the rate of change of our heartbeat over time. And it is a measure that you can get now through almost every wearable tracking device like Oura Ring, Apple Watch, Whoop, that gives you a measure of vagus nerve activity over time. So when your vagus nerve activity is higher, your heart rate variability goes up. And so vagus nerve activity is actually what is predicting increased performance, longevity, health span, and many other things, disease resistance that having high HRV predicts. But it's because HRV is a proxy for vagus nerve activity that you can measure through the skin. So it's become a very powerful measure for looking at how, as our HRV goes up over time, week over week, month over month, it means we're becoming stronger, faster, more resilient, better at bouncing back from stress, better at coping with and adapting to stress, and recovering faster, which makes us, much more powerful and stronger as human beings. And interestingly, there's no cap on HRV. So unlike most biometrics, there's a lower end that you don't want to go below and a top end you don't want to go above. HRV, if you're a healthy human, don't have a cardiac arrhythmia, doesn't have a cap. And so that means if that's a proxy for human potential, then our human potential is potentially completely unknown and unlimited. And I think that's a really, really cool way to think about HRV as a measure. And Apollo was designed to be the first and only technology that actually improves heart rate variability totally passively on the go based on the science of sound and touch, soothing the body and increasing vagus nerve activity.
Speaking of human potential, in your book, you go into intention and the power of intention and what exactly is intention. I would love for you to break that down because through your lens of the science, it was a powerful way to view intention that brought it in a much more practical way for me.
So I think this is a very, very commonly misunderstood thing, which is that intention is just like a kind of like willy-nilly word that we don't really think about. Oh, like we use it in the way like, oh, he didn't intend to do that, but he was an asshole anyway, right? Like that's kind of how we think about it. And like, it wasn't intentional, but I'm sorry, it was still an ass. Like that's just how we use it. And intention is really a reflection of our human energy output.
So let's take someone who has lived most of their life in some degree of hypervigilance, feeling that they have to be perfect and have to control everything in order to be safe. Where does intention fit into that picture? Because someone could look at them and say, well, they are very focused. They are very intentional about what they're trying to achieve, but yet they're not actually achieving it. They're not actually having the growth that they want, even though they seem so hyper-focused on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with what part of it your focus is actually on. And our attention is the other key piece of this, which is the gateway to our consciousness. And our attention is what we have control over. One of those things we have control over, like right here and now in the moment. I can decide I'm going to pay attention to Dr. Aimie. I'm going to pay attention to this other thing on the screen or the bird that just flew by, right? And that would take away from your experience because you would notice that I would be off doing something else. And so if I similarly was to start thinking about a whole bunch of bad things that happen in the past that I regret right now, or start thinking about a whole bunch of terrible things that could happen in the future if something didn't go the way I hoped it would go, then I would equally be distracted from our conversation and not be able, you would see that I would be absent because my attention would be deviated into the past and the future. And so what many people who have very high control anxiety and or PTSD and strong anxiety as a component of that is that they think their focus is on what they're supposed to be doing right now to achieve the goal, but the focus is actually on worrying about the future or regretting something or fearing something in the past could recur. And that means your attentional resources to actually getting your intention to the right place are deviated. And so it feels like, or you're in your phone doom scrolling, right? It could be any number of things. But the point is that we often think that we are moving towards the goal because we set a goal and we're gradually doing the things to get there. But if we're not fully present with the process of getting to that goal, then we're gonna miss things and it's gonna take longer and we're gonna make more mistakes. And so many of these folks, it's not your fault if you're struggling with anxiety and PTSD that is making this hard. It's learned behavior. So we've learned thought processes and focus strategies that are not aligned with the way that we actually are meant to think as human beings. And so it just takes a little bit of practice, starting with like choosing to breathe by choice more often. That rather than letting the environment mediate your breath rate, just choose to breathe by choice. Nice, deep, slow breaths. You don't have to count, but just doing it by choice reminds you that you have control over your attention at any moment. And then you're literally like bodybuilding your attention muscle in your brain that helps you to focus your attention more in the moment on what you have to do right now to get to the goal, and less on the past and less on the future. And then your anxiety comes down tremendously because you can control what's happening in the present, but you actually can't control what's happening in the future or the past. And so anxiety masks as focus, but it's actually not real focus. It's distraction.
What you're sharing gets me lit up because I see that so many people are taught to be in the present moment, but then not taught any skills for how to actually do that.
Right? Yeah. Hence why I wrote this book. I was like, and we weren't even taught properly in school, in medical school. Okay. 12 years of post-college medical training. And I never adequately learned any of these core skills of like, choosing to do things that activate your vagus nerve and bring you back into the present moment where you can actually, your actions and your thoughts and everything we do really matters here, not later, not in the future, which hasn't happened yet, not in the past, which is already gone, but here, now. That's what really matters.
So then what are practices that you still see being done in the therapy space that you kind of shake your head at and are like, oh, if they only knew the science, we would do this better?
I mean, I think the biggest issue is, and in therapy, it has been this way for a long time, which is that generally most therapists are trained very well to curate safe environments for their patients. But there are a lot of therapists out there who haven't done their own work and who often bring their own baggage into sessions and can be judgmental of patients. And that creates an unsafe environment for people to do their work because it's vulnerable and you don't want to feel like you might be judged. So if you feel like you might be judged, you're not going to tell somebody everything they need to hear to help you. I think that's the biggest problem in therapy. But in the practice of psychiatry and medicine in general, most mental health patients are first seen by like a family doc or a PA or a nurse practitioner before they come to somebody like me or a psychiatrist. And most of those folks are prescribing mental health medicine in a way that is not consistent with how we currently know the nervous system works and what people need. And the mental health medicines we have currently, pretty much all of them are focused on stabilization, which is great. for the immediate acute phase of somebody's severe illness, stabilization is really important, but they really don't work well long term. And so we're starting to see that, getting to the root cause of trauma and those events that change the way people see themselves and change the stories that we tell ourselves are really at the heart of healing, not just from mental illness, but also possibly many physical illnesses as well. And it's going to be really exciting to see how the field of medicine evolves over the next 10 years.
Isn't that the truth? It's an exciting time to be in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's arguably the most exciting time to be in the field of medicine, and absolutely with psychiatry, because I think I also argue this in the book that I firmly believe that the evidence to date supports enough understanding that we can cure the first mental illness by 2030 reliably. And I believe that's going to be PTSD. And we've already seen evidence of that from depression and from early studies of technologies like Apollo, where people are having significant relief from suffering and improved quality of life by using minimally invasive or non-invasive tools that don't require multiple times daily dosing of a medication, and that require like short, more intense courses of therapy, but not lifelong, multiple days a week or more every week therapy, but therapy that's like 42 hours in 12 weeks, like intense bursts of therapy, kind of like a psychosurgery, which is very cool.
It really is cool. And what I'd love is for you to share, how do you make this real and practical for your life? I know that you have a very full life. You have a family, you've got your wife, your son, you've got business, you've got your book now, you've got a very full life. So if we're talking about how to be alive, how to live life, how does this actually look like for you? How are you applying these principles in order for you to be your best self and in your best health?
The book is really like my process of learning to do the things that I teach, and and some of them I started to practice before I taught them. Other ones I started to practice after. And at some point I've done all the things in the book, but I do many of them regularly. The main practice for me that is the most helpful on a continuous basis is a practice of self-gratitude and gratitude more generally speaking, which I think is really important because, attention, one of the things we also don't teach properly is that our attention is a finite resource, right? We only have so much attention. So if you think about it, like you only have 100% at any time, then if 30% is in the past and 30% is in the future, then you only have 40% left over for right now, right? We have the ability to only pay attention, with everything exists in any moment, right? Our deepest, darkest fears and our greatest, most magnificent joys, they all exist. Everything exists in every moment. We can choose what we pay attention to. And so, one of the meditative practices that has been most helpful to me is just remembering to try to find things around me to be grateful for as often as possible. And ideally within me, like for just being able to take a breath right now, or being here with you to have this opportunity, which we've been talking about for probably 2 years of doing this again. And it's just, our schedules are so crazy and busy, but we did it. And I'm so grateful that we had this opportunity to talk and that you enjoyed my book, because it means so much as a first time author, even just showing up today, right? Like that, after 28 hours of travel, last day of getting back to New York, that's something to be grateful for. The smells, the greens on the trees and the beautiful smells outside. And it's just so much. And as you start to practice that, you start to identify and notice how often grace appears in nature. And gracefulness is like the ultimate goal for all of us. It's like living with complete ease and knowing that we are all part of the same alive thing right now that's all coexisting together. And as you practice gratitude over time, you start to feel more grateful. And studies have actually shown this is the case. And when you start to feel more grateful, then you start to become more gracious over time. And as you start to practice graciousness, you start to become more graceful. And it forms this positive feedback loop because as you become more graceful, you notice more reasons to be grateful and to express gratitude. And so there's this great feedback loop that happens where you actually start to feel quite good and with a lot less anxiety and more in control of your life by doing one simple ancient practice of just noticing things around you that are good, whether they came to you of your own earning or not. And you can even see now neural pathways rewire in the brain when people do these kinds of practices. And so I think the science is very much supportive of doing things that promote these kinds of helpful feelings and that they actually do promote mental health and improve mood and reduce anxiety, now clinically proven in many clinical trials. So it's pretty incredible how simple that, like a simple practice like that is. I take it everywhere I go. I don't need a gym. I don't need a computer or a phone, right? I can take it anywhere I go and it benefits me and helps me feel better.
It makes me think of in your book how you bring in the energy piece and the energetic vibration nature of our nervous system and our body. And the idea that when I am in gratitude, there's a natural opening up. And it's an opening up to life. It's a undoing my fists and just allowing more because I feel safe to allow more. And then the contrast with experiences that make me feel like I am going to contract or maybe even collapse. And feeling that again, feeling very familiar because that's where I used to live all the time. And remembering that was my whole healing journey, was going from contraction, collapse, protection to opening up.
Yeah.
And every human being will experience different experiences where they contract again. And the most common one that I can see is grief. We have a loss. We feel like we've been gut punched by life and we go in and contract again. How does your principles, what you lay out, apply to someone just having experienced a grief? And what do they do?
Is a great question. This is also something that I feel is very much mistaught, even in psychiatry. I think the way that I think about this is in terms of the toolkit framework that I presented with emotional, cognitive, and behavioral tools. So the cognitive understanding piece of this is that grief is actually a skill. Grief is a skill. Grieving is a skill. And when we feel sad because we've lost something, which we will all face in our lives, usually multiple times, it's just a reality of life because of the impermanence of nature, we will lose things. And we will feel sad that those things are gone now. And the way to process that sadness is to grieve. And grieving technically has, I would say, like multiple stages of experience that are pretty common that people feel, like denial and anger and bargaining, and then eventually acceptance.
It's really reorganizing around what is safe now. Because if this person, place, or thing was what gave me a sense of safety, then how am I reorganizing my world to still have safety without that anymore?
And the practice of grieving is the first step of that, which is to transmute the feelings of sadness, the energy of that powerful emotion of sadness and despair. And then as we grieve that loss, we transmute that energy through crying and screaming and the exercising or whatever it is we need to get that energy out. Through starting with feeling it, we transmute that energy out of our bodies and it's allowed to move. And when we don't do the grieving process, the energy gets stuck and then we feel sad often for an extremely long time. But the actual process of grieving is what gets us to the constructive outcome of effectively, I felt safe enough to feel my own feelings of sadness in this moment. And as horrible as they were and seemed like they would be, I felt them. They told me what message they were trying to send to me as the emotional signals that they are. And I allowed them to move through me. And that process cultivates safety in the body. because it starts with feeling safe enough to feel your feelings, sadness being one of them. But it's like that's just happens to be on the unpleasant end of the spectrum. But it's that feeling it first that helps us remember that we're safe enough to go on without that person or that thing that we had that was like a icon or a symbol of safety, and that we can start to find safety from inside ourselves and ideally, and then also sometimes other things around us.
I think that's the key to life. And if I could start to bring anything into kindergarten and first graders, I would want to teach them how to make it safe to feel their feelings.
Yeah, number one thing. Number one thing. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for writing such a great book. Strongly encourage everyone to go buy this. It is an encyclopedia, so don't think that this is not like a manual. You are getting a manual for your nervous system and for living alive, living open to life. What final thoughts would you want to share with my audience?
The major takeaway that I want people to gather from this is that, this is actually a really hopeful story, right? Like this is a story that begins and ends with profound hope for healing, knowing that science is now showing how it works. And if we know how it works, we can do it at scale now, right? And we're really going to make incredibly transformative moves toward curing mental illness in the next 5 to 10 years. And I just hope everybody listening out there who's struggling with trauma or any mental illness knows that this is not a life sentence and we're getting there. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned as we each learn to be more and more the agents of our own healing journey. And there's so much hope in that. And that's what excites me. When I first started off, my mantra was, Aimie, every day, your only job is to do one thing today that will create a better tomorrow for yourself. And I've stuck with that. And now it's multiple things. It's not just one thing, but they're just the regaining the sense of agency has been so huge. And that is what your work represents and is so obvious in every chapter and every paragraph that you are reminding and reinforcing that agency. So thank you. Thank you again for your work in the world, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for your work as well.
A few things really stayed with me from that conversation. The first is that being told to feel your feelings or to be present in the moment is not the same as being taught how. Most of us were handed the instruction and none of the skill. And the gap is where so much struggle lives. The second is what Dr. Rabin said about grief, that grieving is a skill, a way of letting a heavy feeling move through us rather than get stuck. If you are in a season of loss right now, I hope you heard permission to feel it and to trust that feeling is the way through. And the last is his reminder that this is not a life sentence. A body can reorganize around safety, even long after the moment that first taught it to brace. If this episode gave you language or understanding for something that you have been carrying or experiencing, would you leave a review? It just takes about a minute and it helps another person find their way to this information. And if you want a place to start better understanding your own nervous system, my free guide on is it trauma or is it stress is in the show notes. Until next time, your one job today. Just do one thing that will help give you a better tomorrow. I'm your host, Dr. Aimie. Until next episode, lots of love.